an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Vorkosigan series, Book 2-ish, chapters 16, 17, and 18. In these chapters, Cordelia manages to find the canister, but it's all been a trap, which we saw coming a little, probably, right? Why would you send this guy back to tell her they took it, if not to set a trap? But they still win-ish. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Vicky for commissioning this episode. What's up, Vicky? Vicky's in the chat here. Everybody got to see my adorable kitten because they came to the live, so that's what you're missing out on if you're only listening. So, you guys, this starts off with just the sentence, illegal vegetables. This cracked me up. I was like, for a second, I thought we were talking about, like, the, people who have gone brain dead or something. But no, we're literally talking about vegetables. Cordelia sat in bemused contemplation between sacks of cauliflower and boxes of cultivated brillberries as the creaking hover truck coughed along. Southern vegetables that flowed toward Vorbar Sultana on a covert route, just like hers. She was half certain that under that pile were a few sacks of the same green cabbages she'd traveled with 2 or 3 weeks ago, migrating according to the strange economic pressures of the war. And evidently, food prices have gone up because, that's how shit goes. It was Kudelka who generated the scheme, abandoning his urgent disapproval, drawn into their strategizing almost despite himself. And we find out that Kudelka is a little ashamed of what his father did for a living. He was a grocer. And this is such a funny thing to me because, I understand that this is a very real concern when people have this sort of classism built in, but it's just something that, our classism in the United States is just really different than classism in, say, Britain, is where I think of first, because I know that there's a real shame if you are amongst the gentry, but you had, a father in trade, somebody was a merchant. It's just sort of seen as oh, you're not really one of us then. So, yeah, he definitely has that hang up. And the fact that he is admitting this, he's never even talked about his dad before. And we find out that this is also part of the hang up is he's worried about what Drew's parents are going to think. They dressed for their parts as best they could, pooling the satchel and the clothes they stood in. Bothari and Kudelka played 2 recently discharged vets looking to better their sorry lot, and Cordelia and Drew, 2 countrywomen, co-scheming with them. The women were decked in a realistically odd combination of worn mountain dress and upper-class cast-offs apparently acquired from some second-hand shop. They managed the right touch of misfittedness, of women not wearing originals by trading garments, which I thought was a really smart idea. And Cordelia is just in one of those states where she's super exhausted, but she's too wired to actually sleep. And eventually they get out of the truck and there's there's a concern that there are going to be riots over the food. Vordarian's going to have to put the army in soon before the black market sucks all the food out of the rationing system. Ku in the moments he forgot to pretend himself an artificial vor, displayed an amazing and detailed grasp of black market economics. Or how had a grocer bought his son the education to gain entry to the fiercely competitive Imperial Military Academy. And I really like that there's like a hint here of, not only was he a grocer, but he was a shady grocer. Bothari is the one who leads them to an inn, quote unquote. And it's like pretty, I think, meant to be either very late at night or very early in the morning. And the person running the place does not want to let them in. But eventually, Bothari pulled Drew forward. The stripe of light from the opening played over her face. Well, some clicking of chains, grind of metal, and the door swung open. I was a little confused about this, guys. Why is showing Drew, like later on, he talks about selling her? Was it supposed to be that this person is going to get a cut of him selling her? And that's why they like cave on letting him bring her in? I don't really understand what made them change their mind. And they settled into a cramped, cheap upstairs room, giving Ku and Drew first shot at the beds. As dawn seeped through the window, Cordelia followed Bothari back downstairs to forage. I should have realized we'd need to bring rations to a city under siege, Cordelia muttered. It's not that bad yet, said Bothari. Best you don't talk, milady, your accent. Right. In that case, strike up a conversation with this fellow if you can. I want to hear the local view of things. So this is when he talks about that blonde virgin. No way. Too old. Oh yeah, she can pass for class, that one. We were going to sell it to some warlord at Winterfair, get us a grub steak, but they've all skipped town. Grub steak is spelled Grubstake. I thought in the audiobook that it was meant to be like actual steak, but I don't know what grub steak means. Could try for a rich merchant, I guess, but she won't like it. I promised her a real lord. Cordelia hid her mouth behind her hand and tried not to emit any attention-drawing noises. It was an excellent thing Drew was not here to learn Bothari's idea of a cover story. Good God. Did Barrayar and men actually pay for the opportunity to commit that bit of sexual torture upon uninitiated women? They still do. Madame, I'm so sorry. I remember reading something a little while ago. It was a really, really beautiful woman. I think she was probably like 19 or 20. And she was still a virgin. And she decided to auction off her virginity to pay for grad school. And I remember being like, I even then, I didn't have any judgment about her doing that. And I was like, can you really make that much? Like, that's a lot. And just being like straight up impressed. But yeah, that's, I don't get it, but whatever. And then this guy is like talking about how I can't believe you're going around with this dude who's, he calls him a spastic, which I guess is the word that's used a lot in this universe. He says he's the brains of the outfit. Not too many brains to come up here and try to do that bit of business now. Yeah, I think I could have had a better price for that same piece of meat here if I'd had her butchered and dressed. You got that right, snorted the keep glumly, eyeing the food piled on the counter before Cordelia. She's too good to waste, though. Guess I'll have to find something else till this mess blows over. Kill some time. Somebody may be hiring muscle. Bothari let this trail off. I've had something in my mind I could use a, agent for. Been afraid for a week somebody else go after it first. And he says that Vordarians are asking, the Vordarian troops are offering all kinds of, rewards for people who are giving information that lead to folks in hiding. And he says there's a dude down the street who took a room and he never leaves it except to get food. And every time he gets food, it's a lot more than like one person would eat. I think there's got to be somebody in there. And I know that he's not one of us. And Bothari is like recognizing this may be somebody that we know. And Cordelia tells Bothari to like go for it. Here, woman. Bothari piled the packages in Cordelia's arms. Take these back to the room. Cordelia cleared her throat and tried for an imitation mountain accent. You be careful, belike. City man'll take you. Bothari favored the keep with an alarming grin. He wouldn't try and cheat an old vet more than once. The keep smiled back nervously. So I really do enjoy, like, I'm a big fan of characters, like, having to pretend to be something they're not. I enjoy it when it's done in earnest. I enjoy it when it's a little bit of a joke. I enjoy it when they're pretending to be like each other or something, you know, like all of that stuff. Those are tropes that I just eat up. So I was very much like kind of wishing that this would go on even longer in a way, but they don't have to do this too much. Eventually, Cordelia, she takes a nap and wakes up, and Bothari has found out who it is. Lord Vorpatrol and Lady Vorpatrol, who is with child, and she winds up going into labor a little bit later. And Bothari is like, the thing is, if this idiot in this building has already spotted them, that guy is not good at this. So he's definitely not the only one. Like if he's seen them, so have other people. And if I take too long, somebody else is going to go after him. Let's see. I don't see how joining us now would improve their position. Their covers worked for several weeks. If we succeeded at the residence, maybe we can try for them on the way back. Certainly have Ilian send loyalist agents to help them if we get back. We better do something to discourage your friend downstairs. I have, said Bothari. Told him I knew where I could get a better price and not risk my head later. We may be able to bribe him to help us. And then Bothari says Vodarian has declared himself emperor. And Cordelia's like, exactly what is the significance of him doing that? Like, does this mean that he's super confident? Or does this mean that he's feeling really desperate and just trying to do something to like gain some credibility here? And Ku says, last-ditch ploy to try and sway the space forces. I'm sorry if you guys can hear that. The kitten's over here messing around with stuff. Will it attract more men than it offends? Ku shook his head. We have a real fear of chaos on Barrayar. We've tried it. It's nasty. The Imperium has been identified as a source of order ever since Dorka Vorbara broke the power of the warring counts and unified the planet. Emperor is a real power word here. So that's wild to me. Like, just the idea that you could just declare yourself and then everybody's just like, oh, well, what, really? I don't understand that kind of thinking, but then again, why would I? So they head downstairs again, and the fucking keep is there really pissed. Calls Bothari a gutless git because somebody's already got those people already, and Bothari immediately grabs him and is just like, the fuck, what happened? And he says they're picking him off right now. And they go flying out the door here. And they're hiding, watching this whole thing unfold. Bothari says, Drew, circle round, get a crossfire position covering the other side of those ground cars. Watch out, they're sure to have men at the back door. We've got to get a better position, Bothari muttered. Can't bloody see. A man and a woman walked down the street. They stopped to talk in a doorway. They goggled curiously at the security men who were engrossed in their arrest. Would we pass? Not for long, said Bothari, once they spot our energy weapons, but we'd last longer than 2 men. So they do this, stroll around the corner, and Cordelia, as they're doing it, is just like, yeah, we shouldn't have done this. Bothari's steps slowed as they approached a deep, shadowed doorway. He swung her in and leaned with his arm on the wall, close to her. Despite the shabby shirt and trousers, Cordelia readily recognized the dark-haired man pinned against the ground car by one guard as Captain Vorpatro. His face was marred with a grated, bleeding contusion, his swollen lips pulled back in a stereotypical fast penta-induced smile. The smile slipped to anguish and back again, and his giggles choked on moans. You guys, I hate that so much. There's something about, and you know, it's just that, like, the sort of grotesque quality of things that make you feel a way that you don't actually feel, or when you have to pretend to feel. But like, there's the fact that he is like smiling and giggling while this horrible thing is happening, and if he were in control of himself, you know that he'd probably be screaming. This is so grim. Like, I really hated this, and it reminded me a little bit of, there's in the One Piece live action, there's a scene where all of these people have been like taken prisoner and shackled into riser seats, and they're the audience for this like pirate who has taken things over, and they have to like laugh and cheer for the performance even though they are desperately afraid and crying and just like shaking with fear. And the way it's done is genuinely like a little gut-wrenching, even though that show for the most part plays it a bit tongue-in-cheek a lot of the time. That scene was one that I was like, oh, I don't like this at all. And I didn't know that Fast Penta did this. And the more I learn about Fast Penta, the more I'm just like, no, thank you. And poor Alice, this moment, like the guys have taken her and they were supposed to kill him and the heir. And because she's still pregnant and has not yet given birth, they don't really know what to do. And one of them is like, are we supposed to sit around and wait, squeeze, cut her open, or maybe just take her back to HQ? The guard holding her from behind grinned and ground his hips into her buttocks, mock thrusts of unmistakable meaning. We don't have to take her straight back, do we? I mean, this is vor meat. What a chance. Cordelia realized with a shock that Bothari's riveted attention to the scene before them was no longer tactical. He was deeply aroused. His eyes seemed to glaze as she watched. His lips parted. Oh boy, guys, this was so uncomfortable. I just like, when I think about Bothari and the fact that he was made to rape, I think of him as being constantly an unwilling participant, conveniently forgetting the fact that he continued to like rape this girl that he saved after he saved her. And there is the possibility of him being aroused here because of a weird sort of like association, even if he was an unwilling participant. Those wires can get crossed, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not like attempting to be like, oh, he actually was very much on board with it the whole time. I'm not saying that either. But just the fact that this can have this sort of effect on him is just deeply disturbing for me at this point. So eventually they push Alice to the ground and she like falls onto her stomach, and Cordelia tells Bothari to kill them, and he does. Unfortunately, her husband is killed. They are like a second too late. And I really felt for her having to see this happen. Like, of course she goes into labor after this. Everything has been sort of on the edge for her, we find out later. Like the labor had just barely started. But yeah, the moment of this, I had really thought that he was going to get away, that they could save both of them. And I think I was out for a walk listening to this, and I just went, oh, when I heard the narrator say that he had like dropped and fell twitching. So Cordelia is like, didn't my whole strategy for this mission turn on our staying invisible? We have to get out of here, said Bothari. No shit, agreed Kudelka. The street was quiet, not for long, Cordelia suspected. Shouldn't we take that car? No, traceable. This way, run. Cordelia was not sure if the wild-faced, weeping Alice was able to run anywhere, but she stuck her stunner in her waistband and took one of the pregnant woman's arms. Drew took the other, and together they guided her in the sergeant's wake. At least Kudelka was no longer the slowest of the party. And Alice is like really, really trying to keep it together, but eventually they hear sirens. Bothari has like sort of gotten control of himself again, and Alice is like gasping, and when Cordelia looks, she sees that her robe is wet and that her water broke. I love when Ku says, how much longer? And Lady Vorpatral just says, how should I know? I've never done this before. And Bothari, it turns out, his mother was a whore, and she would have him help with midwifery. She also sold him, we find out. Truly horrifying. Like, he finally gets old enough to fight off these people when he's 12 and runs away. So how long had this been going? Like, how young was he when this started? Like, Bothari's being used for like sexual gratification by everybody in his life is so bleak. Bleak is like the best word I can think of. Like, that is incredibly depressing, upsetting, disturbing, every word. Can you do anything to hold back? And she says, next time you're vomiting your guts out, Ku, let me suggest you just close your mouth and swallow hard. It's not exactly a voluntary reflex. So eventually they find a spot where she can lay down, and she is trying to keep quiet. Eventually, Cordelia gives her something to put between her teeth that she can clamp down on and not scream, because otherwise she's going to draw attention. And I love that when Bothari realizes that after having said what he did about his mother having him do midwifery, he's like, oh God, this means that I'm the one that's got to like make the calls here. Okay, fine. And he asks Kudelka for his jacket, who starts to drape it around Lady Vorpatral's shoulders. And Bothari has to take it from him and put it underneath her hips. And Ku is like, oh, okay. And I'm just like, yeah, sir, you've got bigger fish to fry right now. Don't worry about your fucking jacket. So eventually there's this point, and I thought this was wild. I think he likes where it is, says Bothari. He doesn't want to come out in the cold. This joke actually got through to Alice. Her sobbing breath didn't change, but her eyes flashed in a moment of gratitude. Bothari crouched, frowned judiciously, hunkered around to her side, placed a big hand on her belly, and waited for the next spasm. Then he leaned. The infant's head popped out between Lady Vorpatral's bloody thighs, quick as that. Wow. That works? Guys, I'm going to quote a character from Brooklyn Nine-Nine about giving birth, but that is some Animal Kingdom nonsense. No, thank you. I don't know why people do this. I really don't. I don't get it. You guys, anybody listening that has kids, I think you're a weirdo. That's just all there is to it. I'm not trying to be offensive, and weirdos are fine and great. Most of my friends are weirdos, so it's not like an insult, but it's weird to me. I do not understand. Why would you? For what reason? This is just very, nothing is, nope. So sorry. And then when eventually the baby comes out and starts crying, Bothari says, give me your sword stick. And Lady Vorpatral thinks that he's going to kill the baby. And he's like, that isn't what I had in mind. And then, though it's an idea, he added as the wails went on. Oh my God. It's fucked up. Placenta followed cord on the next contraction, a messy heap on Ku's jacket. She stared with covert fascination at the spent version of the supportive organ that had been of so much concern in her own case. Time. This rescue's taken so much time. What are Miles' chances down to now? After the cord drained white, Bothari cut it with a sterilized blade, and Cordelia self-knotted the rubbery thing as best she could. Ew, 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 ew. Although I will say, the umbilical cord and afterbirth and everything, that's so often just like left out when people tell stories of birth or depict it on screen. So I do appreciate that. But poor Alice is just like, he said I'd have the best doctors and there'd be no pain. And she's just like, in a combo of like elation at having her baby and deep grief at losing him the way that she did and how all this is shaken out. They stood in an alley deep in the maze of the caravanserai, and there is this brothel that our boys had gone to that one time before they got jumped. And Kudelka's trying to say, like, we can't take her in there. And Bothari's like, she needs to get warm. It's cold out here. She has an infant. They need heat. And we gotta go in. They're closing down anyway. So if we can come in, they're not going to be surrounded by clients and stuff. Now it's a sort of inn, says Kudelka after like clearing his throat. And Cordelia's like, oh, okay. And I love when they go inside, he looks around and has this like real apprehensive expression. And then when he doesn't see whoever it is he's worried about, he really calms down and becomes a lot cooler. So they get led to a different, there's a room and a hallway, and Lady Vorpatral gets the room, clean sheets, the whole bit, while I think it's Kudelka and Cordelia are out in the hallway. And I love that Bothari tries to say the baby's a couple weeks old, and the woman who brought them inside is just like, I'm not a fucking idiot. That child is like an hour old, but sure, okay, 2 weeks, fine, whatever you say. So Drew sits with her so that if Lady Vorpatral wakes up, she won't be too alarmed at being somewhere strange. Kudelka went off to find whatever this old building used for a lavatory and try to buy them some food. An underlying tang to the air suggested to Cordelia that nothing in the caravanserai was hooked up to the municipal sewage. No central heating either. At Bothari's frown, the housewoman made herself scarce. This sounds incredibly unappealing. I mean, especially like having just given birth, someplace that is this unsanitary is a really terrible place to be. So Bothari comes out and he starts asking Cordelia about like whether they have whores on Beta Colony. And she describes licensed practical sexual therapists, LPSTs. You have to pass the government boards and get a license. You're required to have at least an associate degree in psychotherapy, except that all three sexes take up the profession. The hermaphrodites make the most money. They're very popular with the tourists. It's not a high social status job, but neither are they dregs. I don't think we have dregs on Beta Colony. We sort of stop at the lower middle class. It's sort of like being a hairdresser, delivering a personal service to professional standards with a bit of art and craft. She'd actually managed to boggle Bothari, surely a first. And I really love this. I am 100% in favor of legalizing sex work. Keeping sex work illegal only serves to empower people who are exploiting women. It's not about protecting women at all. It makes it so women who are being exploited and abused can't come forward. And there are so many instances of like underage girls that are being trafficked and they are being accused of prostitution. How is that even that's not how that works. Somebody is exploiting them and taking the money. And you're saying these girls are doing the illegal thing. It's asinine. So I have always been, even when I was much, much younger, I remember my mother trying to argue that sex work was just like kept women down. And I remember being really confused and being like, but you're pro-choice and that's all about bodily autonomy. And what if these women want to be doing this? And my mom was like, no woman wants to do that. And I remember at the time being like, they might, like, you don't know. And nowadays I understand like what she meant when she says no woman wants to do that, but she was making a lot of assumptions, and also really like she was coming from a place where she has suffered abuse of her own. And there is a difference. And there is also a reality that if you do any kind of physical labor, you're selling your body. And it, like, why don't we get to have a say in how we're doing that? There's just so much puritanical shit still built into our system, and so much like theological tangle about sex and the whole, like, it's just very frustrating, because to me it seems so obvious that if women are protected, if this is legal and it's something that can be monitored, everybody will be safer. It'll be safer for the sex workers. It'll be safer for clients. If you make it so that there's requirements for like STD testing, that's going to be a huge help. There are just so many ways that legalizing would make the entire scenario of sex work safer, cleaner, more like efficient and organized, and probably more profitable. And we just act as if it's completely out of the question. But anyway, what she's describing here, the fact that they need like an associate's degree does crack me up a little bit. I was like, that seems excessive, but I mean, why not? Sure. And I bet on Beta Colony, getting an associate degree is probably less of a overall difficulty, and probably free based on what we've heard of Beta Colony. I'm going to like assume that they have really good education that's like available to everybody. And yeah, this is when he says, my mother was a whore. I don't know why she didn't abort me. She could have. She did those as well at the midwifery. Maybe she was looking to her old age. She used to sell me to her customers. Cordelia choked. Now that would not have been allowed on Beta Colony. I can't remember much about that time. I ran away when I was 12, when I got big enough to beat up her damned customers. Ran with the gangs till I was 16, passed for 18, and I lied my way into the service. Then I was out of here. The service must have seemed like heaven in comparison, till I met Barrayar. He stared around vaguely. There were more people around here back then. It's almost dead here now. There's a great deal of my life I can't remember very well. It's like I'm all patchy. Yet there are some things I want to forget and can't. And I just really like the idea that there are all of these other things that he has lost track of in his life as well. Hadn't occurred to me, but I could understand how like maybe the means by which Barrayarns suppress people's memories, maybe those aren't exactly like surgical in their precision and affect other memories. But Kudelka comes back and she's like, we can't take Vorpatchel and the baby with us where we're going. We can't leave them here. We are going to have to split up. And he says, will you go with her? And she says, no, I'm the one that has to see this through to the end because I started this whole thing. That leaves you. And he thinks, of course, that it's about him slowing them down. And he says, it's like you're running into danger and I'm running away. And she's like, don't start thinking that, because that is kind of like a lazy way of considering the situation, and it could lead to him letting his guard down. And he's like, if the Vordarians catch her again, they'll show her no mercy and not the baby. So you are really going to need to handle this. And he sighs and says, I'll try. And she's like, no, I didn't ask for try. I asked for you to do the thing. Padma tried, which I always get tripped up because I've always thought that Padma was a feminine name. But yeah, he says, yes, milady. And I'm like, maybe this is some of the sort of kick in the tail that she had been talking about having to do with Ku. So, I love Drew here. Oh no, it's not Drew. It's, who is this? Is this Ku? Sorry, I'm trying to find the spot here. Maybe it's Bothari. I guess I understand now why Drew was so worried about being pregnant. Oh no, this is Ku. Okay. It's a transcendental act making life. I thought about that when I was carrying Miles. Our children change us whether they live or not. Even though your child turned out to be chimerical this time, Drew was touched by that change. Weren't you? He shook his head in bafflement. I wasn't thinking about all that. I just wanted to be normal, like other men. And she says, do you think that your instincts and intelligence can fucking work together for once? And he says, I don't know what to say, how to talk to her. I said I was sorry. And when Cordelia says, what bothered me most on the journey up here, I couldn't say goodbye to Errol. If anything happens to me or to him, it will leave something hanging, unraveled between us, and no way to ever make it right. What have you tried? Besides, I'm sorry. How about, how do you feel? Are you all right? Can I help? I love you. There's a classic. Words of one syllable. Mostly questions now I think on it. Shows an interest in starting a conversation, you know? This is one of those things, guys, that I am, like, weirdly bad at. It's like a real blind spot of mine. Somebody be like, how was your day? And I'll tell them how my day was. And it's not until like an hour later that I'll be like, so how was your day? It doesn't occur to me to just like reciprocate in the moment. You know, I'm assuming they're asking because they want to know. And so I fully answer their question. But a lot of times people ask that because they want you to ask them too. And I just fail to catch that a lot of the time. And it's not that I'm not interested, but there are times where I can't tell if somebody wants to talk about something or not, you know? And so I'll ask a lot of questions about like anything that comes up in conversation, I will ask of somebody. But that sort of social like nicety of reciprocating immediately on whatever it is we are discussing now, I fuck that up so frequently. And just her being like, just ask questions. He says, I don't think she wants to talk to me anymore. And she says, like, let's say everything had worked out well between the two of you. You had sex. There was no interruption of a fucking person trying to kill us both. And you decided that you wanted to like get married. What would happen? And he says a go-between, her parents or mine, would hire one and they'd arrange things. And she says, and then what do? Show up on time for the wedding and pay the bill, I guess. Actually, the parents pay the bill. Did you want a wedding? Not just to get laid? Yes, but milady, I'm just about half a man on a good day. Her family take one look at me and laugh. Have you ever met her family? Have they met you? No. Ku, are you listening to yourself? He looked rather shamefaced. Well, a go-between. Huh. She stood up. Where are you going? He asked nervously. Between. So she goes and gets Drew. And I thought she was just going to grab her and take her out here. But there's a conversation with Drew about the way that things went down that night because it's the first real fight that she's ever been in. And she's really struggling with feeling like she didn't do things well. She says, I wanted to kill these guys. I switched to my nerve disruptor. And then the firing started and I hesitated. That's why he died. It's my fault. And when, of course, Cordelia tries to be like, there's a lot of factors there. It may have, like, there's all kinds of ways that he could have died that weren't your fault. Don't take this on yourself. Drew just says, well, Bothari didn't hesitate. And Cordelia's like, yeah, well, honestly, I don't think I'd really try to emulate Bothari in the way he does things. He likes killing people. Like, he's not exactly, even by your standards, that man ain't right. So you shouldn't want to be a monster. And Drew is like, I cannot believe you just called him a monster. And Cordelia is like, he's my monster. He's my good dog. And I was like, trying to remember, does he call himself that at one point? I feel like he did. But yeah, the sacrificial animal that was released yearly into the wilderness to carry the sins of its community away. Bothari was surely her beast of burden. She saw clearly what he did for her. She was less certain what she did for him, except that he seemed to find it desperately important. That's a really interesting sentence. And I like the fact that she's just sort of like, clearly I do something. I don't get it, but it's not nothing. It must matter. Think what a monstrous thing an army of Botharis would be. Any community's arm of force, military, police, security, needs people in it who can do the necessary evil and yet not be made evil by it, to only do the necessary and no more, to constantly question the assumptions, to stop the slide into atrocity. Yes. Yeah, I guess that's true. I wish that there were more of them. I mean, obviously this isn't working with our current situation with cops, so we haven't figured that formula out yet. I love the fact too that she figures out that Drew was like upset when Ku came in due to thinking about this, and Ku, of course, he immediately assumed that the reason that she was being distant and weird was because of him. He's just very self-absorbed. Ugh, Ku, you gotta, dude, you know, stop with the navel gazing. Enough already. So eventually we get to the point where Drew admits, like, I would want to be with him. Yes. I still want him, but I guess I'm afraid he'll hurt me again. Cordelia thought that one over. Probably. Errol and I hurt each other all the time. Oh, not you two, milady. You seem so perfect. And I just really liked this moment. This was something that I said to Owen. Owen had not had very many relationships when we started dating. He was like pretty inexperienced. And I remember at one point when we were first talking about getting together, and he said something like, I'm afraid that I'm going to fuck up, or I'm going to say something and, you know, like really hurt your feelings or blah, blah, blah. And I think he was expecting me to say, like, I know that you won't do that, or don't worry, or whatever. And I just said, you will. You will. And I'll also do that. That's just like part of the deal. The point is that you just get through that part, you know? And he seemed genuinely like taken aback at the suggestion that, like, not only will you, like, it's just built into how this is supposed to work, you know? And she says, can you imagine what mental state Errol is in right this minute because of my actions? Oh. But pain seems to me an insufficient reason not to embrace life. Being dead is quite painless. Pain, like time, is going to come on regardless. Question is, what glorious moments can you win from life in addition to the pain? And that's been underlined by 554 people on my Kindle, according to the old Amazon. And yeah, I am also highlighting this because I have some people that I would like to send that to. So she eventually gets Drew to come out, and she sits with both of them. And at first, Ku just like tries to be like, no. And she says that hand signal means I'd rather blow up the rest of my life than look like a fool for 5 minutes. Ignore it. The best. So she imitates Kudelka's mom, which evidently she had seen him on, or seen his mother on a video and like really captured her style immediately. What Koo just said was he thinks your family won't like him because he's a Crip. No, said Drew indignantly. That's not so. As your go-between, Koo, let me tell you, when one's only lovely daughter points and says firmly, Da, I want that one, a prudent Da responds only, yes, dear. You haven't complained to them yet, have you, Drew? No. See? You can still evade fraternal retribution if you scramble. I know he's been a lout, but I promise you, he's a trainable lout. I said I was sorry, said Koo, sounding stung. Yes, repeatedly, Drew said coldly. And there we come to the heart of the matter, Cordelia said slowly. What Koo actually means is that he isn't a bit sorry. The moment was wonderful. You were wonderful. And he wants to do it again and again and again with nobody but you, forever, socially approved and uninterrupted. Is that right, Koo? Koo looked stunned. Well, yes. Drew blinked. But that's what I wanted you to say. It was? He peered over Cordelia's head. This go-between system may have some real merits. You have a little time yet. You can say a lot in a little time if you stick to words of one syllable. So, that is all taken care of, thank goodness. I'm very glad. Interested to see, the development of these two, both as a couple and as individual people, because Drew is, she has so much to work through being a woman in this society and what she wants to do versus what she's expected and allowed to do. And Kudelka with his injury, but then really falling into self-pity and loathing over it. It's like they both could do each other some good, but they each would have to grow in order to do it. And I really hope that Kudelka learns to be a bit of a better communicator, because it just seems like he is so conscious of his image and maybe is even guarding it more closely than he used to, because now he kind of feels like that's all he has left because of not being able to actually go out into the field anymore. That I just worry, if he was so close to fucking this up, he could very easily just fuck it all up. I don't know, Koo. You just got to get it together, my guy. That's all I'm saying. So, Lady Verpatrol is given clothing to camouflage her as well. And Kudelka is, he gives his sword stick to Drew to hide because he realizes the way that we are dressed, this just doesn't really match up with the image that we're trying to project here. And Drew says, how likely are we to even be jumped by somebody at this hour when we don't look like we've got money? And Bothari is well, honestly, winter's coming, and so people would probably kill you just for your clothes, but there have been troops around, so it's likely more safe right now. So Kudelka again starts to say, we'll try, and then he stops himself and he says, we will, my lady. Gravely, he saluted Drushnikovi. There was no irony in the military courtesy, though perhaps a last tinge of envy. She returned him a slow nod of understanding. Neither chose to confuse the moment with further words. I really did like that they just decided to leave it without speaking. I am just I can't not speak. I can't, but I respect it. I really do. I wish I could be more like that. So as they approach this area, they're passing by all of these streets, and Drew is watching out for them, making sure at one point she kind of thinks this is really when we start looking out of place. They go down this utility tunnel and they have to drop into cold water. And I was just hoping that it was actually just water. They followed to find themselves in another ancient drain, even narrower. What is this place? Too big for a tunnel. The old stables, Drew whispered. We're under the residence grounds now. It doesn't sound so secret to me. Surely they must appear in old drawings and elevations. Yes, but this is the cellar of the old stables, not Dorca's, but Dorca's great uncle's. He kept over 300 horses. They burned down in a spectacular fire about 200 years ago, and instead of rebuilding on the site, they knocked them flat and put up the new old stables on the east side, downwind. Those got converted to staff apartments in Dorca's day. I was just like, oh man, did they kill all of those horses? That sounds awful. 300. That's really, really sad. So eventually they get to this pile of boxes. Izar's cache. I always fuck that word up. Clothes, weapons, money. Captain Negri had me add some women's and boys' clothes to it just last year at the time of the Escobar invasion. He was keyed up for trouble about it, but the riots never reached here. My clothes should only be a little bit too big for you. This is so cool. I just love when people plan ahead. It's just like my fucking cocaine, guys. I really do love this so much. It's like, it's the sort of thing, the satisfaction of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have had so many moments where people are just like, I wish I had a Band-Aid. I wish that there was like a safety pin and I'm just able to be like, haha, because I really do try and plan. Even when I went to Disney and Universal with Rashawn, and she was like in the hotel room with me, and we realized like the bathroom was sort of in the middle of everything. And Rashawn was like, oh man, I should have bought that spray. And I pulled out that poopery spray. And she was like, oh my God. I was like, yeah, trust me. I'm on top of it. I got it. That stuff was like clutch too. Let me tell you guys, if you've ever wondered about poopery and whether it works, yes, it does. Definitely buy some if that is something that if you're going to be like sharing a space with people. Very, very helpful. So they managed to get up into the building, and there's a point where they can actually see the bed that Karine is in, and fucking Vordarian is in the bed with her, and it's like a real example of body language. He sprawled across 4/5 of the bed, his heavy arm flung possessively across Princess Karine. Her dark hair was tumbled on the pillow. She slept in a tight, tiny ball in the upper corner of the bed, facing outward, white arms clutched to her chest, nearly in danger of falling out. It's so clear what's going on here with this, and I was so glad that Cordelia is kind of sharp with Drew later, because Drew is just like, oh wow, she really did sell out, and I'm just like, you fucking moron. Like, come on. And I don't mean to be harsh, but Drew, she can be a little bit of a fucking moron. She can. She's very sheltered and kind of naive about a lot of things, as Barrayar's made her. So I don't entirely like even blame her for it, but God, it just makes me angry, because I know that the assumptions she's jumping to are the assumptions a lot of people would jump to, and it's so short-sighted and like unobservant that I don't have any patience for that. You know, use your fucking eyes, see what's happening here. And Cordelia is like, do people lie in their sleep? She didn't look like a lover to me. She lay like a prisoner. We go for Miles first. So there's a bunch of corridors that they're going to have to go through that are monitored. And it's very, very early in the morning. So they are going through, and long story short, they're having to like pretend to be servants and soldiers and whatnot. They're managing to pull it off pretty well. But there is one guard that seems a bit suspicious, and Bothari lays this guy out with like a single punch and manages to catch him before he like hits the floor to lay him down really softly. And they get to the room that it's supposed to be in, and Drew is very unhappy with the situation because she thinks this is all too easy. She can tell this was a trap. I mean, we all knew, right? I didn't even like say it because it felt to me like it was such a foregone conclusion that this was a trap. Of course, they only let this dude go to tell you about it. They were trying to lure you out. Like, that's the whole reason for this. But what's great is that the actual canister here that is like all keyed up to set an alarm going off if it's picked up, Cordelia has such presence of mind and familiarity with this equipment as well that she looks at it and can realize immediately that this thing is not on. Like, there's nothing in it. And at first, she thinks that this means they dumped her baby. And she's just like, oh no, worst case scenario. But then she looks at the serial number on it. And she can just remember enough of the serial number that was on her son's that she realizes this is the wrong one. And we'll have to retrace our steps back down and up. When the alarm goes up, footsteps thudded in the corridor and shouts. That's done it. They've spotted us. When the alarm goes up, it's all over. Cordelia's thought completed itself in a vertigo of loss. No window, one door, and they'd just lost control of their only exit. Vordarian's trap had worked after all. So, when Drew says, we'll fight to the end, Cordelia is like, the fuck we will. Suicidal glory is the luxury of the irresponsible. We're not giving up. We're waiting for a better opportunity to win. I love her so much. Cordelia's just out here just dropping bars left and right. I swear to God. So, the moment that they get Vordarian in, this dude immediately recognizes who she is and is like, oh my God, he couldn't have wished for a better scenario. He is so delighted. And he says, like, my trap worked. And one of his guys is like, it didn't though. We didn't pick them up at the perimeter. They got into the room. Like, it was just chance that I happened by looking for so-and-so and saw them. Otherwise, they would have been able to, and Vordarian is just so like engrossed in the fact that he has actually gotten the regent's wife that he doesn't even care. He's not paying attention to that at all. So Drusnikovi glowered over her shoulder at Princess Karine in hurt accusation. And I was just like, enough already. Can you not just stop it, Drew? You're better than this. What are you doing? I hate this. Looking at her accusation to her. Why? What is she supposed to do? Like, it's just so typical for us to like get angry at the women in an equation and not the men. And it's almost like we just assume that men are going to be terrible, so we don't hold them responsible for that because it's such a foregone conclusion that it's the women we are assuming would have more morals or a higher threshold for their character. And it's just so, it makes me so mad. So Cordelia has brought with her the shoe, Gregor's shoe, that he was wearing when he got parted from his mother, and one of them came off and it was left here. And it's proof that she has Gregor and that he is alive. And as soon as Karine sees it, she knows what it means. And she tells Cordelia exactly where the replicator is. Cordelia tells her, like, I'm not telling you where Gregor is, but he is safe and he is alive and he is well. Last time I saw him. And Vordarian says, Gregor is at the bottom of a lake, killed in the flyer crash with that traitor Negri. The most insidious lie is the one you want to hear. And I couldn't decide if he believed that or not. I think he's full of shit. I think he knows Gregor's alive. But I don't know. I really don't. I think he believes Gregor's alive. I think as long as she doesn't have anything to fight for or hope for with her son, she's going to be more pliant, and that's what he wants. And so he'll just lean into that, you know? And Karine says this has never been immersed. Cordelia heard the murderous undertones ringing like a bell. Vordarian, apparently, only heard the breathiness of some girlish grief. He glanced at the shoe, not grasping its message, and shook his head as if to clear it from static. You'll bear another son someday, he promised her kindly. Our son. Wait, Cordelia screamed inside. Never, whispered Karine. She stepped back beside the guard in the doorway, snatched his nerve disruptor from his open holster, aimed it point blank at Vordarian, and fired. Guys, when I tell you I was so disappointed that she doesn't hit him. And not only does she not hit him, she gets killed. And now Cordelia is going to have to deliver this fucking news that Gregor's mother died. Like, this whole thing is so awful. And even Vordarian, I think that he actually thinks he has feelings for Karine, because he looks really upset at her death. The liveried man, realizing the enormity of his error, tossed his weapon away as if to divorce himself from his action. Vordarian shot him. This has all gotten quite out of hand quite quickly. Cordelia's hand locked around the hilt of the sword stick and triggered its sheath, flying into the head of one guard, then brought the blade smartly down across Vordarian's weapon wrist. He screamed, and blood and the nerve disruptor flew wide. Drushnikovi was already diving for the first discarded nerve disruptor. Bothari just took out his target with one lethal hand blow to the neck. Cordelia slammed the door shut against the guards in the corridor, surging forward. A stunner charge buzzed into the walls, then 3 blue bolts in rapid succession from Drushnikovi dropped the last of Vordarian's men. So they have him gripped up. This is unexpected. Really delightful. They have to, like, leave Karine there. I just hated this. I liked Karine, guys. I really did. Like, the whole way that she had to operate, trying to protect herself, trying to protect her son, while just being surrounded by fucking maniacs, and the fact that she let her son be a little boy and play, and there was nothing, like, affected about the way she was trying to raise him, at least that we've seen so far. I just really respected her quite quickly. And I felt for her so much, the position that she was in with this guy, like, clearly at first just utilizing the fact that he is not the psychopath that her husband was to try and, like, get her to feel as if he is her protector. And this is something that I don't feel like this gets talked about enough, but, like, there are women who wind up in abusive relationships that have male friends who are sort of, like, in the wings, waiting to jump in and be their savior, because they know that after this woman has gone through such terrible abuse, that as long as they don't pull that kind of shit, this woman's going to think, well, at least he's not as bad as my ex was. And they can sort of leverage the fact that their partner has experienced terrible things to manipulate them. And there's a friend of mine right now that's going through this exact thing. She's with somebody who is also abusive, but not in the same way. And because it's not in the same way, she doesn't see it. And once, like, me and another person sat her down and were like, this is fucked up. Finally, she started to be like, oh, it is fucked up. But because he's not hitting her, she just didn't really see it for what it was. It was at least an improvement. And it really feels like, not that Karine is in that particular headspace where she's, like, unaware, but I think that Vordarian was hoping that he could kind of play that role for her because he underestimated Karine's understanding of the situation, if that makes sense. So let's see. You can't set fire to the residence, Drew gasped in horror. A fortune in antiquities and Barrayar historical artifacts were housed in this wing alone, no doubt. Cordelia grinned wildly, grabbed the weapon, and fired back down the corridor. Wooden furniture, wooden parquetry, and age-dry tapestries roared into flame as the beam's searing fingers touched her. Burn, you. Burn for Corrine. Pile a death offering to match her courage and agony, blazing higher and higher. As they reached the door of the old emperor's bedchamber, she fired the hallway in the opposite direction for good measure. That for what you've done to me and to my boy. The flames should hold back pursuit for a few minutes. She felt as though her body were floating, light as air. Is this how Bothari feels when he kills? That was a little chilling. I won't lie. I was just like, I don't even like you thinking about that. Stop it. So they find the ladder, and Cordelia gets the canister and gives it to her. This whole thing. Thank you, Corrine. I didn't mean to kill you. Surely she was mad. She didn't feel anything. No grief or remorse. A shocky combat high. That immortal rush that made men charge machine guns. So this was what the war addicts came for. Vordarian was still struggling against Bothari's grip, swearing horribly. You won't escape. He stopped bucking and tried to catch Cordelia's eyes. Think. You'll never make it. You must have me for a shield, but you can't carry me stunned. Conscious, I'll fight you every meter of the way. My men will be all over you out there. Stun us all and take you prisoner. Surrender now, and you'll save your lives. That one's life too, if it means so much to you. I never gave orders for that fool Varhalis to kill Vorkosigan's heir, Vordarian continued desperately into her silence. It was only his father, with his fatal progressive policies, who threatened Barrayar. Your son might have inherited the countship from Pyotr with my goodwill. Pyotr should never have been divided from his party of true allegiance. It's a crime what Lord Errol has put Pyotr through. And she is thinking, so it was you, even at the very beginning. And I wasn't getting what she meant here. I love that she calls Vordarian not gaudily evil, like Barrayar. Gaudily is a really great word to use for this. We'd never proved you were behind Evan Vorhalis, Cordelia said quietly. Thank you for the information. Y'all, I don't remember who Vorhalis is. Can you guys help me out here? I don't know, like, if that is that the person, because he's saying I didn't give orders for Vorhalis to do that. And I'm like, is that somebody who worked at the hospital? But I really felt like I was so frustrated here because I kind of wanted to search the name, but I was worried that it would turn up somewhere like and spoil me somehow. Oh, Vicky says the kid behind the Saltoxin attack. Oh no, for Darian. Oh, you little shit. What a fuck. I was completely willing to just let it be that kid himself doing it on his own. But it makes a lot of sense that somebody egged him on to it. That's fucked up. Wow. That sucks. Oh man, that's thank you guys for telling me that. I wish that this has hit a little bit more while I was reading it, but I just didn't remember. Everybody's name starting with Vor, guys. It's hard. It's really tough. I'm not going to lie to you. So when his eyes shifted uneasily to the floor, soon to burst inward. Dead, I'm no use to you as a hostage. You're no use to me at all, Emperor Vidal. There are at least 5,000 casualties in this war so far. Now that Corrine is dead, how long will you keep fighting? Forever, he snarled whitely. I will avenge her, avenge them all. Wrong answer, Cordelia thought with a curious, light-headed sadness. Bothari. He was at her side instantly. Pick up that sword? He did so. She set the replicator on the floor and laid her hand briefly atop his, wrapped around the hilt. Bothari, execute this man for me, please. Her tone sounded weirdly serene in her own ears, as if she just asked Bothari to pass the butter. Murder didn't really require hysterics. Yes, milady, Bothari intoned and lifted the blade. His eyes gleamed with joy. Oh my God. And I love the fact that Vordarian's last thing he says is, you're a Baton, you can't do. Oh, Mr. Vordarian, you really messed with the wrong one, sir. From what I understand, fucking with a woman and her child is never a good plan to begin with. And you just, like, keep not learning that lesson, evidently. And Bothari decapitates him. Wow. Ugh, God. So, what happens next, guys? What happens after Bothari decides to kill this man? I'll tell you what. A bunch of his memories begin to come back. And Cordelia is like, I should have realized that this was going to happen, motherfucker. Like, she understands instantly what's going on. Drushnikovi comes in and is like, we really have to get the fuck out of here. So she goes and finds a plastic bag. She puts the replicator in and pulls the drawstrings. Oh my God, no, guys. I'm so sorry. Not the replicator. She puts his head in it. Oh my God. I cannot believe that I'm like misremembered that. Drew, you're in the best shape. Carry the replicator. Start down. Don't drop it. Drushnikovi nodded, grabbed up both the replicator and the abandoned sword stick. Cordelia wasn't sure if she retrieved it for its newly acquired historical value or from some fractured sense of obligation for one of Ku's possessions. First of all, the historical value? Do you think anybody's thinking about that right now? If that turns out to have been at all a factor, I'll be stunned. But, I don't know, maybe, because this is a sort of thing that, like, if we were in a universe where magic was real, this sword would be so, like, having killed an emperor in this way, it would be, like, completely imbued with magic, right? But that's not history. Like, I think it's purely that this is Kudelka's. It was expensive. It was a gift, and he feels like more of a man with it. And yeah, I'm going to keep it, So Vordarian's people were going to have a very puzzling time poking through the embers and wondering where they'd gone. The descent was nightmarish, and Bothari is just like whimpering. He's still got this horrific headache. And Drew is like, is he okay? And Cordelia just says, he has a headache. And Drew says, are you all right? Cordelia couldn't help it. She laughed. She choked down the hysteria as Drew began to look really scared. No. And that is the end of chapter 18. My God, you guys, I am so over time. I'm really not great with that lately. Oh, man. But yeah, that was very satisfying, and I cannot wait. What I want is for her to just stroll back the fuck into the building with Errol and just drop this man's head on his lap. That's what I would like. I don't think it's going to be that easy, but maybe it will. It'd be kind of cool if it was just that easy. I wouldn't be mad about it. So, well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. All right, everybody. Thank you so much again for coming and hanging out with me. Thank you to Vicky for commissioning this one. Appreciate all of you contributing in the chat. And yeah, I'm just excited to read the next chapters. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.